The heavy oak door slammed with finality behind him for the second time in his life, but this time the brass key rested warm and solid in the palm of his hand. 10 years after being thrown out into the cold California night at 14 for the crime of loving another boy, Jesus Morales stood tall on the familiar porch in Fresno, his heart hammering against his ribs as the afternoon sun bathed the suburban street in golden light. The house looked almost unchanged, the white stucco walls a little more faded, the rose bushes his mother tended still fighting to bloom under the dry heat. He took a deep breath, the scent of dry grass and distant barbecue smoke, pulling him straight back to childhood afternoons before everything shattered. He raised his fist and knocked firmly. The door opened slowly, revealing his mother Maria, her eyes widening in instant recognition. "Jesus," she whispered, her voice cracking as tears already formed. "Is that really you?" He nodded, swallowing hard. "Mom, I am home." The word felt strange on his tongue after a decade of building a life far away. Inside, the living room smelled of lemon polish and old, with the crucifix still hanging above the television, the family photos now missing his face. His father Carlos sat in the worn armchair watching a soccer game, the remote loose in his hand. When he looked up, his expression shifted from mild curiosity to pure shock, then to something darker. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded, standing up slowly. Jesus held up the key, letting the sunlight catch its shine. "This house, I bought it, Dad. The bank was going to foreclose after the medical bills. It is mine now." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. His mother covered her mouth with both hands. His younger brother Luis, now 20, emerged from the hallway, his face a mask of disbelief. "Bro." Jesus felt the old shame rise like bile, but he pushed it down. He had spent years with therapists, and with Diego learning that his worth did not depend on this man's approval. His father stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You think money can erase what you are? You think you can buy your way back into this family after what you did?" The words landed like punches, but Jesus stood his ground. "I did not do anything wrong. I was just being honest with myself." Maria tugged at her husband's sleeve, pleading quietly, but Carlos shook her off. "Get out." Again. The echo of that night 10 years ago crashed over Jesus in vivid detail. He had been 14, shy and confused, sharing a secret kiss with a boy from school in his own bedroom. His father had walked in without knocking. The rage, the Bible, quotes the suitcase thrown at his feet. "No son of mine is a Maricon. Pack and leave." He had walked the streets for hours, then hitchhiked north with nothing but $20 in a backpack. The first nights were hell, sleeping in parks, dodging police, fighting hunger and fear. He reached San Francisco broke and broken. There at a youth shelter, he met Diego, a volunteer who was only 20 himself but carried the same scars of family rejection. Diego had handed him a warm meal and said the simplest words, "You are not alone anymore." That moment changed everything. Over the following months, Diego helped him get identification, enroll in night classes, find odd jobs. Their friendship grew through late-night talks on the shelter roof, sharing dreams and fears. Diego listened without judgment, encouraged without pressure. Jesus earned his GED, then a scholarship to community college. He studied psychology because he wanted to help kids like the boy he had been. Diego pursued social work. They moved into a small apartment together, their bond deepening into something steady and profound, built on trust, shared laughter, and the quiet understanding that they had both survived the same kind of pain. Jesus learned to look in the mirror and see strength, not shame. Now, standing in the living room, he felt that strength tested again. His father paced, accusing him of revenge, of abandoning family values. Maria cried softly. Luis finally spoke up. "Dad, stop. He has been through enough." The tension hung thick, but Jesus saw a tiny crack in the wall, his mother's hopeful eyes, his brother's tentative support. He stepped outside for air, the key still in his hand. Diego waited in the rental car, parked down the street, ready to offer whatever support was needed. As the sun began to lower, Jesus wondered if this return would bring healing or simply reopen old wounds that had never fully closed. The porch light flicked on behind him, and he turned back toward the door, knowing the real work was only beginning. Jesus stepped back inside the house, the cool evening air giving way to the familiar scent of his mother's cooking. Maria had insisted on making his favorite enchiladas, even though the atmosphere was still charged. They sat at the old dining table, the same one where he had eaten family dinners before the world turned upside down. His father refused to join them, staying in the living room with the television volume turned up loud. Luis sat across from him, picking at his food. "I never thought I would see you again," he said quietly. Jesus nodded. "I did not plan on coming back like this. But when you called about the foreclosure, I could not ignore it." Luis glanced toward the living room. "Dad has been different since the heart scare last year. Angrier. Quieter. He never talks about you, but Mom does. She kept your old photos hidden." Jesus felt a pang of guilt mixed with anger. He remembered the letters he had received over the years, his mother's careful handwriting asking him to come home for holidays. He had never answered, afraid of another rejection. After dinner, he helped Maria clear the table, their movements awkward but familiar. She touched his arm lightly. "I am sorry, Mijo, for not standing up more, for letting him send you away." Jesus swallowed the lump in his throat. "It is not all on you, Mom. I was scared too. Scared of who I was." The conversation flowed into the night with Maria sharing stories of the years he missed, the family struggles, the small joys. Luis admitted he had suspected his own feelings but buried them deep to avoid the same fate. The house felt smaller, somehow the walls closing in with memories. Jesus excused himself and walked to his old bedroom, the door still marked with a faded sticker of his favorite soccer team. Inside, everything was as he left it, the bed made, the posters still on the wall. He sat on the edge of the bed, pulling out his phone. A text from Diego lit up the screen. "How is it going, love? Need me to come in?" Jesus smiled, typing back. "Tough, but we are talking. Stay close." Diego had been his constant through everything. After the shelter, they had faced the world together, navigating prejudice in the city, finding community in pride events and support groups. Diego had his own story of being pushed out by a religious family in Arizona. Their bond had grown through quiet evenings, cooking together, long drives along the coast, and moments of vulnerability where they held each other through nightmares of the past. No dramatic declarations, just steady presence. Jesus remembered the day he graduated college, Diego in the audience, cheering louder than anyone. That night they had talked for hours about the future, about building something real. Now back in Fresno, Jesus felt the weight of that future pressing against the past. The next morning, he woke early, the sun streaming through the curtains. His father was already in the kitchen pouring coffee. Carlos looked at him for a long moment. "You really bought the house?" Jesus nodded. "Yes, to keep it in the family." His father snorted. "Family? You left us." Jesus felt the old hurt flare. "I did not leave. You threw me out." They argued again, voices rising, but this time Maria intervened. "Enough. He is here now. Let us try." The day passed in uneasy truce, with Jesus helping around the house, fixing a leaky faucet, mowing the lawn, small acts that felt like bridges. Luis joined him in the yard, sharing stories of school and friends. There was a moment when Luis asked quietly, "How did you know about being gay?" Jesus paused the mower. "It was not something I chose. It was just there, like breathing. And it took me years to stop hating myself for it." Luis nodded, eyes distant. The conversation planted a seed. As evening fell, Jesus drove to meet Diego at a nearby park. They sat on a bench under the bright sky, Diego listening as Jesus poured out the day's emotions. "You are doing the hard thing," Diego said, squeezing his hand. "Facing it all." Jesus leaned into the touch, grateful for the anchor. But inside, doubt swirled. Was buying the house an act of love or control? Was he ready for the misunderstandings that were sure to come? The night ended with him back at the house, the key on his nightstand, a symbol of both ownership and uncertainty. The week unfolded in a series of small confrontations and tentative connections. Jesus woke each morning to the sound of his mother's humming in the kitchen, a sound he had not realized he missed. She made breakfast for everyone, even when his father grumbled about having an extra mouth to feed. Jesus bit his tongue and helped with chores, proving through action that he was not the enemy. One afternoon, while repairing the fence in the backyard, his father approached, tools in hand. They worked side by side in silence for a while, the sun beating down on their backs. Finally, Carlos spoke. "Your mother was sick, you know." Cancer scare last year. That is why the bills piled up. Jesus stopped hammering. I did not know. Why did not Luis tell me sooner? His father shrugged. Pride, I guess. Like father, like son. The admission hung between them, a rare crack in the armor. Jesus shared a piece of his own journey, the nights he spent in shelters, the fear of never making it. His father listened without interrupting for once. But when Jesus mentioned Diego, the wall went back up. That man, he is the reason you stayed away. Jesus shook his head. Diego is the reason I survived. He helped me when no one else did. The conversation ended abruptly, but it was progress. Inside the house, Luis pulled Jesus aside in the hallway. I have been thinking about what you said. About knowing. Jesus waited. Luis continued. I think I might be like you. But, Dad, the fear in his brother's eyes mirrored his own from 10 years ago. Jesus pulled him into a hug. You are not alone. We can talk when you are ready. The moment felt like a turning point. That evening, Diego joined for dinner at Maria's insistence. He brought flowers and a calm energy that eased the tension. Carlos was civil but distant. Maria asked Diego about his work, and the conversation flowed naturally. Later on the porch, Diego and Jesus sat together under the stars. You are changing things just by being here, Diego said. Jesus nodded, but worry gnawed at him. What if the progress was temporary? What if his presence caused more pain? The next day, a neighbor stopped by, an old family friend who had known Jesus as a boy. The conversation turned awkward when the man asked about his life in the city. Jesus answered honestly, and the man left quickly. Later, his father exploded. Now the whole neighborhood will know. You are bringing shame back. Jesus felt the sting, but stood firm. Shame is what you taught me, Dad. I am done carrying it. The argument spilled into the living room with Maria crying and Luis trying to calm everyone. Jesus stepped outside to cool down his mind, racing through the years of self-doubt, the times he had questioned every choice. Diego met him at the park again, and they walked the paths talking through the conflict. Diego shared his own memories of similar family blow-ups. We do not have to fix everything in one trip, he said. But you are planting seeds. Back at the house that night, Jesus lay awake, listening to the familiar creaks of the house. The key on the nightstand caught the moonlight, reminding him of the power he now held, not just over the property, but over his own story. As the days turned into a second week, Jesus began to see patterns in the family dynamics. His mother hovered protectively, cooking larger meals and asking about his life in San Francisco. She listened with wide eyes when he described his counseling practice, helping young people navigate identity and family rejection. You are helping kids like you, she said one afternoon, her voice full of pride. Jesus nodded. And like Luis might be. Maria sighed. Your father will come around. He has to. His father, however, remained distant, working long hours at the auto shop and avoiding eye contact at dinner. One evening, Jesus found him in the garage tinkering with an old truck. The space smelled of oil and metal, a place where they had once bonded over engines before everything changed. Jesus offered to help, and for a while they worked in silence. Then Carlos spoke. I never wanted this for you. The life you live. It is hard enough without adding that. Jesus wiped his hands on a rag. Life is hard for everyone, Dad. But hiding who I am made it harder. The conversation turned to the past, Carlos admitting the pressure from his own immigrant parents to be the strong son, the provider. I thought I was protecting you, he said. From the world. From God. Jesus felt the shift. It was not forgiveness yet, but understanding. Meanwhile, Luis opened up more, sharing his fears and late-night talks on the back porch. Jesus offered guidance without pressure, drawing from his own journey and the lessons Diego had taught him about patience and self-acceptance. One weekend, the family attended a neighborhood barbecue. Jesus brought Diego, and the two mingled with old neighbors. There were awkward questions and curious glances, but also genuine conversations. A cousin pulled Jesus aside. Good for you for coming back. Family is family. The words warmed him. That night back home, his father watched a game with Luis, and for the first time in years invited Jesus to join. The tension eased slightly with shared cheers and comments on the place. Diego stayed in a nearby hotel, respecting the family space but checking in daily. Their phone calls were lifelines filled with encouragement and laughter. Jesus reflected on how far he had come from the scared boy on the streets to the man who could sit in his house and hold his ground. The internal crisis that had once consumed him, the nights of questioning his right to exist, had given way to a quiet confidence forged in the fires of rejection and rebuilt with love and purpose. Yet he knew the road ahead was not smooth. Misunderstandings lingered and sacrifices loomed. He had put his practice on hold to be here, and Diego had rearranged his schedule too. But the bonds forming felt worth it. The turning point came unexpectedly during a family dinner when Carlos suffered a mild chest pain. The room erupted in concern, and Jesus helped get him to the hospital. In the waiting room, the family sat together, the shared worry stripping away some barriers. His father looked frail in the hospital bed later that night. When the doctor left, Carlos reached for Jesus' hand. "I was wrong about some things," he admitted. "Not all, but some." The words were halting but sincere. Jesus felt tears prick his eyes. "I'm not asking you to change, Dad. Just to see me." Back home, the days settled into a new rhythm. Jesus and Diego took walks in the local park, discussing the future. Diego suggested they host a small gathering to celebrate the house being saved. Maria loved the idea, and even Carlos grunted approval. The gathering was simple: neighbors and extended family, filling the backyard with laughter and food under the bright sun. Jesus introduced Diego as his partner, and to his surprise, most people were kind. One aunt hugged him. "Love is love, Mijo." Luis smiled more freely that day. In quiet moments, Jesus and his brother talked about the future, Luis considering college and perhaps coming out when ready. Jesus shared stories of his early days in San Francisco, the struggles, the triumphs. He described how Diego had stood by him through job losses and identity crises, always reminding him of his strength. The emotional growth was palpable. Jesus no longer saw himself as the victim of his past, but as the architect of his future. Yet a misunderstanding arose when an old school friend spread rumors in town about his return being for revenge. His father heard the gossip and confronted him angrily. "You are stirring up trouble again." Jesus explained calmly, but the hurt lingered. Diego helped him process it during a long drive. "People fear what they do not understand. You are showing them another way." The days continued with small acts of reconciliation, his father asking about his work, Maria sharing family recipes. Jesus felt the weight of the 10 years lifting slowly. He had sacrificed time and emotional energy to be here, but the rewards were real. The key to the house had become more than a legal document. It was a key to unlocking hearts long closed. With the house secure and family tensions easing, Jesus began to think about returning to San Francisco. His practice needed him, and Diego had commitments too. But Luis asked him to stay a little longer. "There are things I need to figure out." Jesus agreed, extending his visit. During this time, deeper conversations unfolded. His father opened up about his own youth, the pressures of machismo, in his culture, the fear of weakness. "I thought being hard on you would make you strong," he said one evening. Jesus replied softly, "Strength comes from love, not fear." The exchange was raw but healing. Maria watched with quiet joy. Diego joined more family activities, and Carlos even asked him about his work with at-risk youth. The bond between Jesus and Diego strengthened in the midst of it, all their shared glances and supportive words a constant reminder of the life they had built. One afternoon, Jesus and Diego visited the shelter where they first met. The place had expanded, and the director remembered them fondly. Seeing the impact they had made years ago reinforced their purpose. Back in Fresno, a final confrontation arose when Carlos found an old photo of Jesus and his first crush. The anger flared again, but this time it was short-lived. Jesus explained the innocence of it all, and Carlos listened. "I see you now, son." The words were simple, but they landed like a bomb. Luis chose that moment to share his own truth with the family. The room was silent at first, then filled with tears and hugs. The misunderstandings of the past began to dissolve, replaced by acceptance and support. Jesus felt a profound sense of closure. He had faced the pain, the rejection, and the internal battles and emerged whole. The sacrifice of returning had been worth every difficult moment. As the visit drew to a close, Jesus packed his bag, the key, now a symbol of triumph rather than burden. The family gathered on the porch for goodbyes. Hugs were exchanged, promises made to visit. Diego stood beside him, a steady presence. Driving away, Jesus looked back at the house one last time, the sun setting behind it in a blaze of color. The road back to San Francisco stretched ahead, filled with reflections on the journey. Jesus and Diego talked for hours about the changes, the growth, the remaining work. In the city, life resumed, but with a new lightness. Jesus threw himself into his counseling sessions, inspired by his own family experience. Diego continued his advocacy work. They hosted friends and celebrated small victories. Yet the past was not forgotten. Occasional calls home brought updates and shared laughs. Luis was thriving, exploring his identity with support. Maria sent care packages. Even Carlos called once to ask about a repair. The emotional awakening was complete. Jesus had confronted every layer of his pain and chosen forgiveness on his own terms. The key he still carried on his keychain served as a reminder of the power of return. Months later, during a family visit to the city, the full circle felt real. They walked the streets together, sharing meals and stories under the bright California sun. No more hiding, no more shame. The bonds forged through conflict and understanding were stronger than before. Jesus looked at his family and at Diego and felt complete. The journey from rejection to reclamation had shaped him into a man of compassion and strength. Years after that pivotal return, Jesus stood on the same porch, now renovated and filled with new memories. The family gathered for a celebration, Luis graduating college, Maria healthier than ever, and Carlos softer around the edges. Diego was by his side, their partnership a quiet testament to enduring love. The house buzzed with laughter and stories, the past no longer a shadow, but a foundation. Jesus held the key one last time before handing it to Luis as a symbol of passing on strength. The misunderstandings, the betrayals, the sacrifices had all led to this moment of wholeness. He had grown from the boy thrown out into the night to the man who unlocked doors for himself and others. The emotional journey complete, he looked at the faces around him and knew the choices had been worth every tear. True or false, returning to the place that once rejected you is always the path to true healing.